Унікальність – це про Навчально-науковий інститут Права. Співпраця з університетом штату Алабами продовжується. Зараз стартував курс гостьових онлайн-лекцій з корпоративного права від професора, адвоката-практика Стівена Хамфріса. У понеділок пан професор особисто завітав в гості до Навчально-наукового інституту Права Державного податкового університету для зустрічі з слухачами курсу та адміністрацією. Зустріч виявилась не лише змістовною, але й напрочуд теплою. Студлайф взяв ексклюзивне інтерв'ю зі Стівеном Хамфрісом та поспілкувався, як йому вдається організовувати роботу, що слухачі відчувають себе студентами американського вишу.
Next to me is a professor from the University of Alabama and practicing attorney, Stevena Hamfrisa, who has begun giving guest lectures to students from Ukraine in our Institute of Law. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I would like to ask you a few questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So let's start with this question. How exactly this idea came about to give lectures?
Yeah, so the long story is I was very interested in Ukraine. I became very interested in Ukraine because I worked on some of the criminal investigations related to the impeachment of our president, and later on issues of Russian election interference in the United States. So after the invasion, I won't say when the war started, because really a war started in 2014, and that's when Americans started paying much more attention to Ukraine. But after the invasion of February 2022, I decided I had to come to Ukraine to help however I could, because it was the most important thing happening in the world, I thought. And so I came originally to help clients of mine make a documentary film about the war, and that is still going on. But also as a practicing attorney, I started to get into the project of how to go to court to make the Russian Federation and Russian war criminals pay for the damages to Ukraine. And it actually, that was the reason for my first visit to the State Tax University at Irpin, because obviously you have a lot of destruction here. It's destroyed stadium, a destroyed administration building, and that is still a project we might work on. But that's how I became acquainted with the university. And when I first came here, despite the destruction, I felt like it had a very nice feeling to the university, a nice atmosphere, and that it was I thought, up-and-coming university. It was going to be very important in the future of Ukraine. And that's, at the time, I was already teaching at the University of Alabama, so that's when we started talking about the possibility that maybe we could begin some cooperation with me teaching a course here at the university. I suggested I should teach French, but they said, no, teach the contract law. So that's how we started. Obviously, that's more practical, and the reason for that is one day this war will be over, and the United States will be very involved in helping rebuild Ukraine, and there are going to be many construction contracts and everything, so it's an important subject to study. The next step after that, when we started talking about my teaching a course here, then I went back to my dean at the University of Alabama and said, I'm teaching this course, and will the university support it? And by the way, why don't we create a joint program, not just one course, but a joint program with the University of Alabama cooperating with Ukrainian universities, and create a program of Ukrainian studies for the American students in Alabama.
Thank you. How do you address potential language barriers during your lectures? And what strategies do you use to ensure that students are able to understand and participate fully in discussions?
Yeah, so that's an issue because I know the students in the class, there are many students who I think have many different levels of understanding English. And my level of Ukrainian is terrible. First of all, I am working in the future so that I am more conversant in Ukrainian, and that will help a lot. Maybe one day I can teach the class in Ukrainian. But meanwhile, I think it's useful for all of the students to practice their English and learn better English. Again, in the future, if you want to work with American lawyers and companies to do business or in the rebuilding of Ukraine, the students who speak the best English will have an advantage. That might be more useful for you to learn than the contract law that you learn. So, but I've been thinking of ways to make sure that nobody is left behind. We slowed the class down a lot from the beginning to try to go over things more carefully and make sure everybody understood and was with us. I also think there's a possibility in the Zoom of doing a chat where students can ask questions, although as I'm lecturing, it's really impossible for me to try to follow the chat also. But I think that I think in the next class, I'll give out my email address so that students who are struggling can email me and ask questions. Encourage all the students to practice talking, and one way to do that is, which is normal, and we would do it in the United States as well. If you don't understand what the teacher said, stop, teacher, explain to me what you meant, and that's important for your English, for your legal education, and also for your training to be a lawyer.
As we can see, the number of people willing to listen and adopt your experience is great. And in the feedback, the students know that you managed to organize the work in such a way that the listeners felt like students of an American university. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me, please, how did you manage to do it? And maybe you have any secrets that you can share with us and our teachers?
Well, my main secret is that I was once a law student myself. So I have to go back and remember when I did not know anything and how the course was taught to me. So I'm indebted to my professors, I think, back on how they taught me.
Thank you for such a short but interesting conversation. And on behalf of the entire institute, I would like to thank you for the highly professional approach to conducting each lecture, for an interesting and relevant experience. We look forward to the next meeting. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.